Here's a question that used to keep me up at night. Why do lottery winners go broke, while trust fund kids seem to stay rich forever? Seriously, nearly 70% of lottery winners lose everything within a few years. But families like the Rockefellers? They've been wealthy for over 150 years, 6 generations and counting. At first, I thought the answer was obvious. Rich kids get more money. End of story. But that's not actually what's happening here. Because if money alone kept people rich, those lottery winners would be set for life. They got millions, and they still went broke. So, what's the real difference? Here's the uncomfortable truth I wish someone had told me years ago. Rich kids don't just inherit money, they inherit a completely different operating system for how to think about money. And that operating system? It's worth way more than any trust fund. Let me show you what I mean. Think about the first time you learned about money. For most of us, the lessons were pretty basic. Don't spend more than you have. Save up for things you want. Maybe put some birthday money in a piggy bank. And look, those aren't bad lessons, but they're incomplete. They're like teaching someone to drive by only explaining the brake pedal. Sure, knowing how to stop is important, but it's not going to get you very far. Kids from wealthy families? They get a different curriculum entirely, and it starts earlier than you'd think. Here's the first lesson they learn that most of us don't. Money is a tool, not a reward. Most of us grow up thinking of money as something you get for working hard. You trade hours for dollars. The more you work, the more you get, and then you spend it on things you've earned. But wealthy families teach their kids something different. They teach them that money is a tool that can work for you. Like a hammer builds houses, money builds more money. Your job isn't just to earn it. Your job is to put it to work. I didn't really understand this until my late 20s. I thought investing was something rich people did with their extra money, like a hobby. It never occurred to me that investing was the whole point, that the goal isn't to save money. The goal is to make your money generate more money while you sleep. This one mental shift changes everything. Because once you see money as a tool instead of a reward, you stop asking, "What can I buy?" and start asking, "What can this do for me?" Here's the second lesson wealthy kids learn early: the difference between assets and liabilities. And I promise this is less boring than it sounds. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out. That's it. That's the whole concept. But here's where it gets interesting. Most of us buy liabilities and call them assets. A car? We call it an asset. But unless you're an Uber driver, it's probably costing you money every month. Insurance, gas, maintenance, parking, money flows out. A house? We're told it's our biggest asset, and it can be. But if you're paying a mortgage, property taxes, repairs, and upkeep, money is flowing out every month. It might appreciate over time, but right now, it's a liability. Wealthy families teach their kids to tell the difference. They learn to buy things that generate income first. Things like rental properties, or ownership stakes in businesses, or investments that pay dividends, which are basically little payments companies send you just for owning their stock. Then they use the income from those assets to buy the fun stuff: the car, the vacation, the fancy watch. This is backwards from how most of us do it. We buy the fun stuff first, and then try to save what's left, which usually isn't much. Now here's the third lesson, and this one took me the longest to understand. Wealthy families teach their kids about tax strategy. I know, I can feel your eyes glazing over. But stick with me for 60 seconds because this might be the most important part. For most of us, taxes are something that happens to us. They take a chunk out of our paycheck before we even see it. We file once a year, hope for a refund, and try not to think about it. But wealthy families think about taxes completely differently. They see the tax code as a rule book full of legal ways to keep more of what you earn. And they teach their kids how to use those rules. Here's a tiny example. A Roth IRA is a retirement account where you pay taxes on money going in. But then everything it earns grows completely tax-free, forever. You could put in $6,500 a year, and if it grows to $1 million by the time you retire, you pay zero taxes on those gains. Most wealthy families have their kids open one of these as teenagers. They put in money from summer jobs. They learn how it works. By the time they're adults, they already have a decade of tax-free growth under their belts. Meanwhile, I didn't open a Roth IRA until I was 32 years old. Nobody told me. And when I finally figured it out, I was genuinely angry. That's over a decade of tax-free growth I missed out on because I didn't know the rules existed. This is what I mean by inheriting knowledge versus inheriting money. The money in that Roth IRA matters, but knowing to open one in the first place? That's the real inheritance. Here's the fourth lesson wealthy kids absorb: how to use debt strategically. Most of us learn that debt is bad, and honestly, for most debt, that's true. Credit card debt at 20% interest will absolutely crush you. Car loans, personal loans, financing furniture at the store. These kinds of debt make you poorer. But wealthy families teach their kids that some debt can actually make you wealthier. It depends on what you're borrowing for and how much it costs. Let me give you a specific example. Say you can borrow money at 4% interest to buy a rental property that generates 8% returns after expenses. You're making 4% on money that isn't even yours. The bank's money is making you richer. This is called leverage, which is just a fancy word for using borrowed money to amplify your results. Wealthy families teach their kids when and how to use it. The rest of us learn to be afraid of all debt equally, which means we miss opportunities to use it as a tool. Now, here's the fifth lesson, and it might be the sneakiest one. Wealthy families teach their kids about networks and social capital. When a wealthy kid needs a summer internship, they ask their parents' friends. When they want advice on starting a business, they call someone their family knows. When they need a loan, they have relationships at banks that go back generations. This isn't about being handed things on a silver platter. It's about having access to information and opportunities that aren't publicly available. Who you know affects what you learn about, which opportunities you hear about, and who will take a chance on you. For those of us who didn't grow up with those networks, we have to build them ourselves. It takes longer, it's harder, but it's not impossible. Every relationship you build, every mentor you find, every community you join, that's you building the network wealthy kids inherited. So, where does all this leave us? Look, I'm not going to pretend the playing field is level. It's not. Starting with money and connections is a massive advantage. Anyone who says otherwise is trying to sell you something. But here's what gives me hope. The knowledge piece? That can be learned. The operating system wealthy kids inherit? You can install it yourself. It just takes longer because you're doing it on your own. And here's the beautiful thing about financial knowledge. Once you learn it, it's yours forever. You can teach it to your kids. You can share it with your friends. You can break the cycle. So here's what I'd suggest. Pick one thing from this video, just one. Maybe you open that Roth IRA this week. Maybe you start thinking about which of your purchases are assets and which are liabilities. Maybe you look into one tax strategy you've never heard of before. You don't have to do everything at once. Wealthy families had generations to pass this knowledge down. You're doing it in one lifetime. That's impressive. Give yourself some credit. The money wealthy kids inherit? That helps. But the knowledge they inherit? That's what actually keeps them rich. And unlike a trust fund, knowledge is something anyone can acquire. If this helped you understand something about money that used to feel confusing, consider subscribing to Like You're 5. We break down finance concepts without the jargon, the judgment, or the condescension. Just clear explanations from someone who also had to learn all this the hard way. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.